What's the most disturbing secret you've discovered about someone close to you? Story 1. A work colleague appeared on the front page of a national newspaper for living a life built on fraudulent qualifications. He claimed to have medical and law degrees, was a brigadier in the Army Reserves, and served as the chief executive officer of a major health fund. He truly was a brigadier in the Army Reserves, but both that position and the health fund role were largely founded on fake credentials and a string of jobs based on those same false claims. In reality, the only qualification he actually held was as a mortuary assistant. Not even his wife knew the truth. The fraudulent degrees had been created while he worked in Army Reserves recruitment, where he had access to submitted job applications. His downfall came when he applied for a government job and the recruitment staff raised concerns. He tried to withdraw the application but did not realize that a government application carries the same legal weight as a statutory declaration and cannot be withdrawn. Everything fell apart very quickly, and he eventually ended up serving jail time. Story 2. She was my best friend for 7 years, and we had been through everything together. I moved out of state with my now husband, but she convinced us both to move back after about a year to be closer to her. We had no real ties to the state we had tried, so we said, screw it, let's go back. She's basically family. We were all so happy to be reunited. She was over almost every night for dinner, and we laughed and had the best time. It was the best year of my life. Then slowly she began trying to turn my husband and me against each other. Whenever we had an argument, she would text both of us separately, agreeing with each one, trying to create tension between us. With me, she started talking about how she had a plan B for us, saying that if my husband and I couldn't make it work, I could move in with her and we would live happily together. With my husband, she talked about her infertility issues and how she wanted to have a child just like him, that she only needed a sperm donor. This all happened around the same time, and my husband and I compared messages and realized what she was doing. She wanted to take his sperm and have a baby with me. When confronted, she refused to admit anything and began lashing out at both of us. It got so bad that she would show up unannounced, banging on the door and demanding to come inside. It became so terrifying and stressful that we ended up moving and changing our phone numbers. It was disturbing because I had never had a friend like her, only to find out she cared about me in such an unhealthy and frightening way. But that's my story. My husband and I are doing great now, by the way. Story 3. The 24 hours before my dad died from stage 4 lung cancer, he was in the emergency room and then in the intensive care unit, and we were unable to be with him because of hospital COVID rules. My mother, sister, and I had been texting and calling him all day with no response. My mother even called the hospital and spoke with one of his intensive care nurses, who said he was awake and communicating fine. He passed very suddenly at 3:30 in the morning the next day. We were allowed to be at his bedside, but by then he was no longer conscious, so we said our goodbyes, and he was gone. Later that morning, while my mom slept, I was calling cremation services to schedule the hospital pickup and going through the bag of belongings they had returned to us. His phone was in there, and I wanted to read our last messages and find comfort in my final words to him. When I opened his phone, I saw that none of our texts, mine, my mom's, or my sister's, had been read. I thought it was odd, but assumed he was too weak. Then I noticed a chat app I vaguely recognized. I opened it and found one contact with a woman's name. As I read, I realized my dad had been chatting with her hourly for the past 24 hours, and as far back as I could scroll. He called her Princess, told her he loved her, and she said she was scared for him and wanted to know why he was in the emergency room. It was clear he was having, at the very least, an emotional affair. My grief turned to shock and anger. A week later, I tracked the girl down and spoke to her online. She was 19 years old and told me she had met my dad when she was 17. He had been her high school bus driver, and they had been dating for almost 2 years. My dad was 66 years old when he died, dating someone younger than his grandchildren, someone he chose to spend his last moments with. I hope it made him happy, but it's a painful secret to carry, one that will forever overshadow my relationship with him, with no chance ever to talk about it. It's the one truth I wish I had never found. Story 4. I do not know how disturbing this is. It turned out pretty wonderful for one person, but not for another. I was adopted and told a silly magical story about my birth parents that never sounded believable, even when I was a child. At 57, I learned that I was the result of a college affair between a very devoted Jewish young man and a very Baptist young woman. She was sent away to a home for wayward girls to give birth, and he followed her there, traveling many states to beg her to keep me and build a life together. But their families both refused. In the mid-1960s, Jewish people were not considered white, and her family did not want her marrying someone they saw as non-white. She also was a deeply committed Christian and did not want to convert to Judaism. So I was placed into another family. I recently discovered 3 wonderful half-siblings, and we are all professional or semi-professional musicians who get along beautifully. I never met my mother. She died a year before I began my search. My father does not want contact and prefers to be left alone. I am at peace with that and grateful for the love he gave me. It was enough. Another person from my non-biological family was also adopted. She was older than I was and later tracked down her biological mother. Her story was far more tragic. Her mother had been in a hospital since the day she was born. She was born severely disabled, physically, mentally, cognitively, and sensory, and had been raped by an orderly. She discovered she was the result of that assault. Not every adoption story has a happy ending. Story 5. A few years after I married my first wife, I learned that she had been in an ongoing sual relationship with her first cousin before meeting me. I figured it out one night while we were sitting around a campfire, just the 3 of us, by the way they looked at each other. I always knew he was her favorite cousin, but never suspected anything until that moment. I have always been good at reading people well, except for the woman I dated. Anyway, I noticed a look between them and asked straight out when they had first hooked up. She was so stunned that she admitted it immediately and said, "How did you know?" Then she added, "Oh God, I wonder if anyone else in the family figured it out." They had been sleeping together off and on for at least 2 years before I met her, though I suspect it continued afterward as well. Another fact she kept from me before we married was that she was bipolar and untreated. Things eventually got bad, and I was lucky to walk away. I divorced her in 2014. As of last year, I told one of her female cousins, who cannot stand her, so I am sure the family knows by now. Story 6. Before I begin, I want to say that this story does not have my permission to leave Reddit. To understand, you need to know that I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and with it comes severe memory loss. With that said, here is my story. When I was 16, my mom sat me down and told me she had once walked in on my grandfather molesting me when I was only 2 weeks old. No one knows when it stopped. I always felt different, anxious, and depressed. But when she told me, she also revealed that it had happened to her as well. She knew he was a monster, yet still allowed him to raise me. I had all the symptoms growing up, including wetting the bed until I was 13. I told people that I knew something was wrong, but they called me dramatic or a liar. A few years ago, he reoffended, and only then did people finally believe me. It is painful spending your whole life feeling invalidated, invisible, and utterly alone. I am in my 30s now and still feel lost and hopeless. I do not know how to move on. I am sorry for rambling. I have never written out how I felt before. Reading it now feels strange. I will probably delete this soon because I still want to stay invisible, but I decided to share since others were brave enough to tell their stories too. Story 7. It is not exactly a secret someone shared with me, but rather comments made by someone about a particular murder case in the Midwest of the United States. All I will say is that a family member very close to me has, every so often, made remarks about a certain murder that took place in the region where they grew up. The murderers were caught, but little to no remains were ever found. And during the investigation, it was revealed that the victims had been fed to pigs. My family members' comments have always been vague, never incriminating or revealing new information, yet they have always unsettled me, not only because of how consistently these comments come up, but also because of the serious, hushed tone they use, giving me the impression they might know more than they let on, whether firsthand or secondhand. Rumors tend to spread quickly in rural America, but it still makes me uneasy. It does not help that at the time of the murders, this relative worked at a slaughterhouse owned by another family member, a former biker, and an interesting character in his own right. This person also loves making everyone uncomfortable at family dinners by describing in gruesome detail the process of slaughtering animals, especially pigs. They have always been obsessed with true crime, and murders are rare in their area, so that could explain their fascination. Still, I cannot shake the feeling that they know something more and may one day decide to reveal it. Maybe next time I see them, I will ask. Story 8. I found out as an adult that my mother did not simply abandon me one day after work, as I had been led to believe. It turns out she had been gang raped. She told me they took her wallet and made a disgusting comment about my photo inside. I would have been a toddler then, and she was too terrified to go home afterward. She said they followed her, and when it was over and my stepdad took her to the hospital, the doctors had to stitch her up. She spent much of that time in and out of psychiatric wards. My mom and I still have a rocky relationship for reasons beyond this, but I understand her better now. She has struggled with alcohol and mental health issues all my life, and I truly believe it is because she never got the proper help for what she endured. Beneath all that trauma, drinking, and pain, she is still my mother and one of the most beautiful souls to ever walk this earth. For clarification, she did stay in my life, but my grandparents raised me. There was a lot of other drama too, but none of it is worth getting into. Story 9. In high school, I had a friend I was not close with for long, maybe a semester, but we bonded over our struggles with mental health. Sadly, she took her own life not long after. It was years later that I learned from her best friend what she had really been going through. Her parents had divorced because her father came out as gay, and she chose to live with him since she was also gay. Their family became viciously homophobic toward them both. Her brothers spray-painted slurs on their house and slashed their tires, and her mother once pushed her down a staircase, breaking her leg. She also had ongoing health problems that worsened her depression. Eventually, she could not take it anymore and ended her life. Almost exactly a year later, her brother also committed suicide, presumably out of guilt. I was told the family was investigated, but the last I heard, her mother had begun speaking at suicide prevention events. Story 10. My best friend of 25 years once confessed to me that they believed themselves to be a sociopath, and they said it proudly. They even shouted, "I do not care about anyone but myself." I recoiled and tried to convince them otherwise, listing examples to prove they were wrong. But over the next couple of years, as life grew more chaotic, I began to step back and really observe their behavior. Over time, I realized they were right. They had been manipulative, abusive, and toxic for decades. They constantly brought awful people into their life, people who would destroy yours if you disagreed with them. After years of subtle cruelty and emotional sabotage, I finally woke up to who they really were and cut them out of my life completely. The healing process has been long, but freeing. It felt like I had been on a slow intravenous drip of poison for decades, and the moment I pulled it out, I finally stepped into the light. Story 11. My extended family on my mother's side has a strange habit of turning horrific family events into funny stories at gatherings, probably as a way to cope with the trauma. They would tell stories like the time my grandfather tried to shoot my grandmother in front of their children, or when my mom was beaten for saying that Billy D. Williams was attractive. Both stories told at Christmas parties, even when I was a kid. The only things they do not turn into jokes are the events too dark for anyone to process. Those are the ones I have only ever heard small hints about, and maybe that is for the best. The one that stands out most is when my grandmother casually mentioned that my grandfather had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan, had taken part in lynchings, and was proud of how good he was at it. Later, I learned the only reason I saw him growing up when my cousins did not was because he knew where my mom lived, but not his other children. So visiting was not optional for us. In hindsight, it all makes sense. His home and everything about it were strange and unsettling, like spending time with the mute grandchildren of his new wife as they dressed dead rats in doll clothes and played with them in a dollhouse made of driftwood. Story 12. When I was about 4 years old, my mom traveled back to China to have an abortion, and my parents hoped I was too young to remember. But I did. I remember her visiting doctors many times, getting ultrasounds and checkups. Then she left for several months, leaving just my dad and me in the United States. And when she returned, she never spoke about it again. I asked her where the little sister, who was supposed to be born, had gone, and they said something vague, like she had disappeared. When I was a teenager and learned about pregnancy and abortion, I started to suspect what really happened. When I asked her about it, she denied everything, saying it never happened and that I must have imagined it. Classic gaslighting. Only recently, more than 30 years later, I asked my uncle about it, and he confirmed it was all true. He said she did have an abortion and that his sister and my grandmother had helped take care of her afterward. My parents were poor immigrants living in a very conservative state, surviving on my dad's small graduate school stipend, and they could not afford the procedure. They made the decision because the baby had severe birth defects and would not have survived anyway. Story 13. Finally, I can share this story. My now husband, who was my fiancé at the time, and I are both teachers. We spent a couple of years teaching in rural Alaska. It was intense, but also an incredible adventure. We learned a lot about what we wanted in life and plenty about what we did not. During that time, we befriended one of our colleagues, an older single man who seemed friendly enough. We often went over for dinner, hiking trips, and even to shoot his gun collection at a nearby rural beach using the school's Honda. He took on an uncle-like role for us, and once during vacation, we stayed at his Airbnb, his spare bedroom in the city. During our second year there, he brought along a young woman at the start of the school year, claiming she was his niece. She never left his house. He said she was having trouble living with his brother and was taking online classes to finish school. And she told me the same story, so it seemed believable. By spring, she left for home separately from him, and when people asked why, he said she had made peace with her father and returned home. It turned out she was actually an underage girl he had met online. Her father tracked her down after she reached out to a local woman about her situation, and a state trooper escorted her home. She had been reported missing for 8 months. The disturbing part is that the following summer, while awaiting trial for that case, he tried to lure another underage girl online to live with him again, but that time it was an FBI sting. He is now in prison until the year 2043. Story 14. I have almost no interaction with my extended family. They mean nothing to me. I only keep my mom, dad, and one brother close. The rest are selfish, cruel, and not worth my time. I learned the hard way not to trust them after losing money, time, and peace of mind because of them. They allowed terrible things to happen to my father, their own brother, and when my grandfather died, they continued to mistreat him out of spite because he was a stepson and only their half-brother. All the money my step-grandfather had, along with the house he owned, had been given to my grandmother by my father's real family to help care for him. When she died when I was 8, everything was left to her husband. When he passed away, the will gave money to all the grandchildren and children, except for my family, because we weren't considered blood-related, even though the money had originally been meant for my father. He had never worked for any of it. The house and everything else were paid for by the money left for my dad. Years later, they reached out saying, we should let bygones be bygones. No, they fueled hatred and greed and stole what rightfully belonged to my father. Their father was nothing more than a usurper who took what wasn't his, my father's rightful inheritance. Story 15. My father cheated on my brother's mother with my mom, and she had no idea. They eventually married, and I was born exactly 1 year after their wedding anniversary. Not long after, he began cheating on my mom with multiple women. Even when visiting his mother, my grandmother, on her deathbed from cancer, he met up with other women behind my mom's back. After she died, my mom and I returned home while he stayed behind for the funeral. Eventually, he left my mom and remarried in Mexico to a woman who was the same age as my brother from his first marriage. He died in 2011 of a heart attack on the freeway, but somehow managed to pull over and park before passing away. My brother and I had to collect his belongings, and when we went through his phone, we discovered he was still cheating on his current wife in Mexico. The names in his contacts were listed as boss, lawyer, and other fake titles, but the messages told the truth. We weren't surprised. We decided to do him one final favor. We erased everything from his phone. He was a player until the day he died. A scumbag, yes, but based on what I've heard about his past, It seems he had always been that way. Maybe that story is for another time. Story 16. My soon-to-be ex-husband lied about having cancer twice to cover up his affairs. The first time, he told me he had to leave town for treatment because I was too weak to handle it and that he needed to focus his energy on beating cancer, not taking care of me. I hated myself for being weak, for believing him. In reality, he was out of town sleeping with another woman while I was home alone, caring for our children for 6 months. He fooled everyone, our friends, our families, even his boss, who he told that he had days to weeks to live. I found texts he sent to a friend describing how he was throwing up from chemo, yet the dates matched a weekend we spent together at a hotel for a romantic getaway. He didn't even mention his cancer returning until a month later. The truth is, he never had cancer at all. He was never even tested for it. He let me, our children, and everyone who loved him cry, panic, and grieve over a lie. He made us believe he was dying twice. It was cruel beyond words, and I don't think I'll ever fully recover from that kind of betrayal. Story 17. About 6 or 7 years ago, I was in a tough housing situation. Rent in my city is sky high, and I had just been kicked out of my apartment because the letting agency wanted to renovate. I posted online looking for new flatmates, and a guy I vaguely knew reached out. I recognized him from anime conventions, never a promising start, and we had chatted a few times, even had a few drinks together. He was also friends with some of my close friends. We met for Chinese food to talk about living arrangements, and during that meal, he casually told me that he had dissociative episodes and sometimes woke up not knowing where he had been or what he had done. He even said he once woke up with blood on his hands and no idea how it got there. I smiled politely, but in my head I was thinking, there is no way I'm moving in with this guy. A few weeks later, I started hearing whispers from mutual friends about an incident that had happened at an anime convention involving him, though no one would give me details. They said there was an ongoing investigation. It didn't surprise me much, but it wasn't until years later that I got a message from someone telling me to unfriend him immediately. He had just been convicted of violently raping a girl at knife point at an anime convention and was sentenced to prison. Everything suddenly made sense. My friends finally opened up to me. They had known him since they were teenagers and had been close for years. When the assault happened, he told them the girl was lying and that he was innocent. They wanted to believe him, at least until the trial. But when they attended court, the truth came out. There was overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Police found a bag containing a knife, rope, duct tape, and other restraints. Apparently, the girl he attacked wasn't even his intended victim. His real target had been a girl one of my friends was dating at the time, someone he thought was leading him on after a long dry spell. He even admitted that he had thought about killing her. I don't know the victim personally, but I can only imagine the horror she went through. Watching my friends process the fact that someone they'd loved and trusted for years turned out to be a violent rapist was heartbreaking. One woman who said she couldn't believe he was capable of it ended up receiving anonymous death threats from people who thought she was defending him. It showed me how traumatic, messy, and far-reaching these kinds of events can be. That man is in prison now, and that's exactly where he belongs. Story 18. This isn't exactly disturbing, but it was incredibly shocking. Throughout the time I knew my great-grandfather, up until I was about 8 when he passed away, he never once spoke about his time in the military. He had served in the First World War after lying about his age at 17. We knew he had been wounded. He was confined to a wheelchair because of it, but that was all anyone ever knew. After his death, while my parents were sorting through his belongings, they found a Victoria Cross, the highest British military honor for bravery in battle. They were stunned and started digging into his records. It turned out that my small, quiet great-grandfather had fought at the Battle of the Somme. During the chaos of going over the top, he looked back to check on his friend and was shot through both legs by a single bullet that passed sideways through them. At the same moment, his friend was shot in the throat. Despite his own injuries, my great-grandfather crawled back to the British trenches, dragging his wounded friend with him, while bullets and artillery exploded overhead. Both of them survived. He was awarded the Victoria Cross for his heroism, but he never told anyone. Not his wife, not his children, not his grandchildren. He simply didn't want attention or praise, and he didn't want to relive the trauma of war. Men of that generation were truly made of something else. Story 19. This story sounds like something straight out of a soap opera, but it's my real life. My parents have been married for over 30 years. About 10 years ago, when I was 27, I found out that my mom had been married before to another man when she was 19 and had a daughter with him. That daughter, Claire, is my half-sister, and my parents had completely erased her existence from our lives. I had no idea she existed. Around the same time, I also learned that my eldest brother, Sam, is my half-brother also from that first marriage. Sam had left home when I was little, and though he came back when I was 16, he and my parents had a big argument when I was 18, and he disappeared from our lives again. Suddenly, everything made sense. How differently my parents treated him. How tense things always were. I found all this out because Claire reached out to my other brother, Peter, on Facebook and told him point blank that she was our half-sister. He was furious, and that forced my parents to finally admit the truth. They claimed they had been trying to protect us, but I'm pretty sure they just never planned to tell us at all. When my mom mentioned that Sam was also her first husband's son, I asked, "Wait, so Sam is my half-brother?" And she just said, "Well, duh," as if it were nothing. She started crying, and I comforted her at the time, but in truth, it broke something in me. The last 10 years have been hard. I don't trust my parents anymore. Claire grew up with my grandmother after my mom and dad decided she wasn't wanted in their new family. My mom completely cut off contact with my grandmother, which is why I only met her twice, once when I was 18 and again just before she died. I didn't learn the truth until after she was gone. My parents still pretend everything is fine, but it's not. I moved 2 hours away 8 years ago, and they've never once visited me. Yet they expect me to show up for every holiday and guilt trip me if I don't. My mother's texts give me anxiety. I don't think I'll ever fully forgive them for the lies and for abandoning their own children like they never existed. Story 20. My wife's grandparents fled Europe after the Second World War. They entered the country using fake documents because they had burned their real ones to avoid being caught, as those proved they were Jewish. Her grandmother's false papers even listed the wrong birth date because she needed to appear younger to meet the fertility requirements for immigration. That fake date of birth stayed on every official record, even her death certificate. The only place her real birth date exists is on her gravestone, which her son arranged himself. Her grandfather's papers listed him as a builder, even though he was a qualified architect, because the country only wanted laborers, not educated immigrants. When they boarded the ship, neither of them spoke a word of English. Her grandfather learned English during the voyage and was fluent by the time they arrived. He eventually became incredibly successful and respected within the community, building a new life from nothing. My wife's family history is truly remarkable, a story of survival, reinvention, and quiet strength. Story 21. My youngest brother, who had always been a kind and sensitive kid, ended up shocking all of us in a way none of us could have ever imagined. Growing up, he had always been sweet, quiet, and soft-spoken. He and his girlfriend even made a virginity pledge together, promising to wait until marriage. We all thought it was cute and admirable, but behind that innocent exterior, something darker was happening. He was secretly having an affair with his girlfriend's mother, the same woman he called Mom. It all came crashing down when his girlfriend walked in and caught them in bed together. After that, he ran off and married her mother. The scandal didn't end there. My brother had joined the army, but the situation quickly spiraled because his girlfriend's father was an army chaplain. The military does not take kindly to officers sleeping with other men's wives, especially on base, and he ended up being discharged. From what we later learned, he'd already been warned multiple times about his behavior before things finally blew up completely. At the time, none of us knew the full truth. He told my parents that he was dropping out of high school during his senior year so he could live with his girlfriend's family until they both turned 18 and could get married. My parents were heartbroken and tried to change his mind, even taking him to counseling. But during a private session, the counselor told them he was worried my brother might hurt himself or someone else, so they reluctantly let him go. A month later, we got a letter from him saying he never wanted to hear from us again. A few months after that, the truth came out. His girlfriend caught him sleeping with her mother, and not long after that, he got kicked out of the army. When my parents eventually cleared out his room to make space for a new baby, they discovered all kinds of things he had stolen from us over the years, along with letters filled with pure resentment. He had written about how much he hated everyone in the family, except me. In one letter, he called me a lonely loser. The last we heard, he was working at a Home Depot, married to his ex-girlfriend's mother, living with her and her elderly mother, and considering electrician school. He's still bitter that my parents haven't reached out to him, even though he made it very clear that he never wanted to see or speak to them again. Everything we know about his life now comes through mutual friends, his ex-girlfriend, and, believe it or not, his mommy wife's Facebook page. My parents have been devastated by all of it, but they've chosen to respect his wishes and stay out of his life, even though it's broken their hearts. Story 22. From the age of 14 to 16, I made one bad decision after another. I slept around, drank too much, and did reckless, dangerous things. I hurt people, ruined relationships, and lost everyone's trust. Eventually, my parents had enough and kicked me out. I was 16, alone, and forced to find a job just to survive. It was a lonely, brutal time. Completely cut off from my family, I clung to the few people I had left, and one of them was a guy I hadn't been especially close with before, but who had always been around in my social circles. We grew close fast, and over the next few years, he became my best friend. Then his mother, his only parent, was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and died. He was devastated, and I did everything I could to support him. I fed him, gave him a place to stay, kept him supplied with booze and substances to numb his pain, and even paid for his college exams multiple times when he failed. I never asked for anything in return. He had been there for me once when I needed someone, and I thought I was doing the same. Around a year after his mother passed, I met a girl and fell completely in love with her. It was intense, volatile, passionate, and addictive. We were on and off constantly, but I loved her more than anything. Those two, my girlfriend and my best friend, were the two people I cared about most in the world. I trusted them both completely. But slowly things started to change. My best friend began driving me to her house, picking me up, and then going for drives with her when I wasn't around. I didn't think much of it at first, but something felt off. Eventually, my relationship with her fell apart. We were toxic together, constantly fighting, and I was losing control of my life again, drinking heavily, missing work, barely keeping it together. Not long after the breakup, I learned the truth. My so-called best friend had used every personal secret I had ever told him about my past, my mistakes, my drinking, my mental health as emotional ammunition. He used those stories to paint me as dangerous, unstable, and unworthy of love. He told my girlfriend all the things I had confided in him, using my own pain to manipulate her. He pushed her towards substances and kept repeating how I had hurt people until she was so emotionally worn down that she finally gave in to him. He took her virginity, and for an entire year, while both of them were still seeing me, they carried on a secret relationship behind my back. My best friend and my girlfriend betrayed me together, lying to my face every single day. I didn't find out until after she and I had broken up for good. One night, drunk and desperate, I walked to her house in the pouring rain at 2 a.m. and saw them sitting together in his car, parked in her driveway. That moment shattered me. The pain was unbearable, raw, deep, and all-consuming. I spent the next 5 days hiding under my blanket, crying, self-harming, and drowning myself in substances and alcohol. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't speak to anyone. On the 5th day, I completely broke down and called my parents after nearly 3 years of silence. I don't even remember what I said, just that I was sobbing. It was the lowest point of my life. Story 23. This isn't disturbing in the way some stories are, but it still left a mark on me that I'll never forget. For 15 years, my dad pretended that his wife didn't like me. He insisted on always seeing me alone, saying that she preferred it that way. I could never understand why. I think he was insecure because she and I have so much in common. We work in the same academic field, a really niche area, and maybe he felt threatened. She's also more outgoing and talkative than he is. Or maybe it was something else entirely. Maybe he didn't want me to find out the truth about how they met. Not at their kids' writing lessons, as he always said, but years earlier when they both worked at the same university. For years, I thought their marriage was falling apart because he always told me that I was the only person who really understood him. He'd say he had no friends, that she didn't get him, and I believed him. I thought I was helping him by being there, by listening. Then one day, I visited while she was home. The moment she saw me, she hugged me tightly and said how happy she was to finally see me. She said she hoped we could spend more time together. I was stunned. She told me my dad had said I didn't want to see her, while he had told me that she didn't want to see me. They were affectionate, kind, and clearly happy together. Hugging, kissing, laughing. Watching them that day, I realized he had been lying to both of us for 15 years. He had kept us apart intentionally. I still don't know why he did it. Maybe it was jealousy, maybe control, maybe fear of being exposed. But whatever the reason, it broke me. It made me question every conversation we'd ever had and every story he'd ever told me. I left that day hurt and confused, realizing that the person I had trusted the most had been the one lying to me all along. Story 24. For 23 years, I lived believing my dad despised me. Our house was a Cold War zone. The only time he spoke to me was when he was shouting, and even then, it was never about anything meaningful, just corrections, complaints, or pure anger. We'd sit across from each other at the dinner table and avoid eye contact like strangers forced to share a space. We might exchange a handful of words in an entire year, even though we lived under the same roof. Meanwhile, he absolutely adored my younger brother. They fished together, laughed, shared jokes, and built things in the garage. It was obvious to everyone that he loved my brother and couldn't stand me. I spent my childhood trying to earn his approval, then my teenage years resenting him. Eventually, that resentment curdled into hatred. I hated him, and I knew he hated me, and the cycle of it all tore me apart inside. My grandmother, who was my safe place part mom, part best friend, could see how much it was eating away at me. One day when I was 23, she finally sat me down and told me the truth. The man I had called my father my entire life wasn't my biological dad. My real father had left before I was even born. My mom met the man who raised me when I was barely a year old. Suddenly, everything clicked. The reason for all those years of hostility and coldness wasn't some imagined fault of mine. It was that I wasn't his son. When my brother was born, his actual child, everything changed for him. From that moment, he saw me as a reminder of another man's betrayal and treated me like an unwanted guest in his own home. I remember feeling two opposite things at once, relief and humiliation. Relief that maybe he didn't just hate me for existing, but also deep embarrassment because people had asked me for years if he was really my dad. They noticed how differently he treated me compared to my brother. I always defended him, saying, "Of course he's my real dad. My mom would never lie about that." But she did. She never once told me the truth, not even when things between us got unbearable. It broke something inside me. When I finally learned everything, it felt like my entire childhood had been built on lies. People wonder why I have trust issues. It's because the two people who were supposed to love me the most, my mom and the man I thought was my father, spent decades pretending that wasn't the truth. Story 25. In the summer of 2010, my brother and I went to stay with our grandmother, our dad's mom, for the school break. It was supposed to be a fun few weeks of fishing, cooking, and just spending time with her. About 2 weeks after we returned home, she called my mother, furious. She accused me of stealing $7,000 from her safe. I was stunned. I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. I'd never even seen a safe in her house, let alone opened one. My mom thankfully believed me right away. She told my grandma there was no way I would do something like that and pointed out that there was no proof. But my grandmother wouldn't hear it. She insisted she knew I was the thief and said she didn't want to see me again. She even told me through my mother that I was banned from her house forever. It crushed me. For 7 years, she didn't speak to me, not once. She stayed close with my brother, though. Sent him cards, called him often, invited him to visit, everything she denied me. The silence was deafening. I kept hoping that one day she'd realize she was wrong, But that call never came. Then earlier this year, over a decade later, I found out the truth. My brother had been the one who stole the money all along. He admitted it to another family member years ago. But here's the real gut punch. Grandma found out the truth in 2011, less than a year after the money went missing. She knew. She knew it wasn't me, and she knew it was my brother, but she never said a word. She never apologized. She never told me I was innocent. She never even confronted him about it. She just let me carry the blame, let me be exiled from the family for something I didn't do. For 12 years, my entire dad's side of the family knew the truth. They all knew it was my brother, yet no one told me. No one reached out. No one tried to repair what was broken. They all just let me live as the scapegoat while he got to stay the golden child. Even now, Grandma acts like nothing ever happened. We're civil for the sake of family gatherings, but she's never once acknowledged what she did. I lost a decade of family because of a lie that everyone chose to protect. Story 26. My cousin had everything going for him. He was in college on a full-ride football scholarship, talented, disciplined, and heading toward a bright future. Then his girlfriend, now his wife, accused the team's star quarterback of rape. The university launched an investigation but quickly closed it, saying there was no evidence. My cousin believed her completely. In a show of solidarity, he quit the team, dropped out of college, and walked away from his scholarship. He wanted to stand by her, to prove he was loyal. Years later, after they had a baby together, she admitted it had all been a lie. She had cheated on him with the quarterback and didn't want to admit it, so she called it rape. You'd think that would have been the breaking point, but it wasn't. After her confession, she told him she felt trapped, that she'd gotten married too young and hadn't experienced enough of life. She didn't want a divorce, just space. So she left him and their child, moved back in with her college friends, and partied while he worked full-time to raise their baby alone. He still loved her, though. After a year or so, she started coming around again, acting like nothing had happened. Then came the second wave of chaos. One day, my cousin was arrested. She had gone to the police and claimed he'd been beating her. She even filed for a restraining order, providing evidence in the form of photos showing her face covered in bruises. It looked bad until the case went to court. Investigators quickly discovered that the photos were obvious fakes. In one, the black eye was on her right side. In another, just a day later, it had jumped to the left. The bruises were unnaturally dark, perfectly round, and clearly painted on. When confronted, she broke down in court and admitted she had fabricated the entire thing. You'd think that would have been the end of it, that my cousin would have finally walked away. But even after all that, she kept trying to get him to come over while the restraining order was still active. Thankfully, he had the sense not to go. 6 months later, she dropped the order, and somehow they got back together. Apparently, most of her old partying friends were settling down, and she suddenly decided she wanted her family back. Now, she's pregnant again. They're expecting their second child. The worst part is that his parents, my aunt and uncle, spent over $15,000 on lawyers to save him from a false conviction. When they asked him to start helping pay them back, both he and his wife cut them off completely. They haven't spoken to his parents since. He's back with the woman who destroyed his life, and no matter what anyone says, he insists she's changed. The rest of us just watch in disbelief, knowing it's only a matter of time before the next disaster hits. Story 27. A while back, I decided to take a DNA test to see if I could uncover anything about my birth family. When the results came in, I matched with someone listed as a possible close cousin. After some messages back and forth, we pieced together that our connection was likely through his father's side, either his father's dad or one of his uncles. His father later did a DNA test as well, and the results seemed to confirm it. So my cousin began digging into his family history, focusing on one of his dad's uncles who matched all the right details, the correct age, the same town, and the same time period as what little I knew about my biological parents. But what he found next turned everything upside down. It turned out that this uncle wasn't who he said he was. The name he had used for decades wasn't his real one. There were no records of him under that name, no birth certificate, no employment history, no official trace at all. No one in the family really remembered what he did for a living or where he originally came from. Some thought he might have lived in another country before. Others said he was born locally. Everyone just recalled that he was polite but private, never talked much about his past, and always avoided personal questions. The more my cousin researched, the stranger it got. It seemed this man had erased his previous identity completely and started fresh under a false name. Why he did it, whether he was escaping something or someone, we'll probably never know. He died a few years ago, taking all his secrets to the grave. In the end, I solved one mystery who my biological relatives were, but uncovered an even bigger one in the process. I finally found where I came from, but now I have no idea who he truly was or what he was running from. Story 28. I spent 10 years with my ex-partner, helping raise his 2 kids from a previous marriage and having a baby of my own with him. I thought we had built a solid life together until, 18 months after we separated, I found out he had been having an affair with another mother from our children's school. An affair that started 2 years into our relationship and lasted for years. I reached out to her directly, and what she told me still makes my blood run cold. From the very beginning, he told everyone at the school that I was his live-in au pair, not his partner. So for a decade, my entire community, teachers, parents, even friends, watched me living as his supposed employee while he carried on an affair behind my back, and no one said a single word. I worked at that same school as both a teacher and a counselor, surrounded by people who knew the truth but stayed silent. The woman told me that when we announced our pregnancy, she confronted him, realizing something wasn't adding up. He told her that we had just recently started dating. He'd take the kids I was raising to family picnics and outings with her, spend money on her children, and even go on holidays together. They took family photos as if they were one big happy family. That meant my stepchildren, his kids, were part of keeping the secret from me too. 4 years into our relationship, he proposed to me in front of his children, claiming his divorce had finally gone through. That was another lie. He was still legally married to his first wife. When I finally confronted him, he admitted everything. He said he was still close with his ex-wife, that they spoke weekly, and even complained that her moving to another state with their children had broken his heart. He actually expected sympathy. For years afterward, I thought I must have been naive or stupid not to see it. But now I realize that trusting your partner isn't stupidity, it's normal. People like him, professional liars and cheaters, can deceive anyone. The problem was never that I was too trusting. It was that he was too convincing. Story 29. When I was about 14 or 15, my cousins started moving in with us. First one, then another, then their stepsister. Their father was a useless drunk married to an abusive woman, and my mom took them in out of love and guilt. Over time, the stepsister left, then one of the cousins followed after too much fighting. Eventually, it was just me, my mom, my brother, my sister, and my second cousin, who became like a sister to me. My mom hadn't dated anyone in years, 10, maybe more, but then she met a man named C. He was funny, charming, and warm. He came to my school plays, made everyone laugh, and fit into the family like he had always been there. My cousin and I shared a bunk bed. Mine was the top single, hers the bottom double. She often stayed overnight at her mother's house, even though her mom was a raging alcoholic. We always thought it was strange, but we didn't question it much. Whenever she was gone, I'd sleep in her bed because it was bigger. One night while she was away, I noticed her pillow was oddly lumpy. I opened it and found a belt stuffed inside, and not just any belt, but C's. I dug further and found his shirt hidden there too. She kept a diary, and I knew that's where the truth would be. I read it. What I found made me sick. My cousin had been sleeping with my mom's boyfriend for months. She was 17. He was 41. After everything my mom had done for her, after taking her in, feeding her, giving her a new start, this was how she repaid her. That was about 14 years ago. They stayed together for a long time after that, which disgusted me even more. Recently, I found out she's now single and devastated over being betrayed by someone she trusted. Word is, C isn't single. I can only assume karma finally came back around. Story 30. When I was younger, my older brother started dating my best friend, who was 16 at the time while he was 19. She told me she liked him, but was afraid to confess because she thought I wouldn't approve. I felt uncomfortable but decided to support them anyway. They were both lonely, shared common interests, and I figured I couldn't stop them from liking each other. Still, something about it always felt strange. After a while, I started noticing small lies from her, claims that didn't add up. She'd say things like, "Oh, I love kickboxing and boxing." But every time my best friend and I would go, she refused to join, saying she didn't like sweating. It was odd, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just trying new things to impress my brother. They dated for about 3 months before she called me, saying her parents didn't like him and that she wanted to break up. I told her to make the decision based on her own feelings, not just her parents' opinions. Later, she called again, crying, saying she finally ended things and was proud of herself. I felt awkward. My brother adored her and would talk about her constantly. I knew this would devastate him, but I told her to trust her judgment and stand by her decision. Then I saw the text she sent him, and my sympathy for her vanished. She broke up with him over text, saying cruel, cutting things like, "Our relationship wasn't even surface level. You weren't that interesting, and from the start, I knew we wouldn't work." This was after she had been the one to initiate their first kiss just a week into dating. My brother was heartbroken, completely crushed. For the first time, he came to me for comfort, and seeing him that broken made me furious. A few days later, I saw her at the mall joking about dating someone's dad because he was rich. Even her brother told her to stop, saying, "Time and place, that's not funny." After that, she became distant. Her whole family changed toward me too. Her mom started ending conversations with a fake-sounding, "Love you, bye, before I could reply. Her dad accused me of being disrespectful for simply asking if she could hang out. And even her little cousins started acting rude and snobby. Over the summer, she completely ghosted me and our mutual best friend. When we confronted her about ignoring us but still reaching out whenever she wanted something, she blocked both of us. Not long after, her mom started posting fake friend quotes on social media, tagging her daughter in them and writing things like, "I love you, baby. Friends are temporary, but family is forever." That one hurt because I had never said a bad word about her in all our 6 years of friendship. I'd always supported her, encouraged her, and treated her like family, especially after my dad died, when her family told me I was part of theirs. A year later, she reached out again, and that's when I learned the truth. My brother had been manipulating her the whole time. He told her she wasn't his type, that she was average, that her family was controlling, and that he was the only person she could trust. He lied to her, saying I constantly talked badly about her and that she should cut me off completely. It broke me to realize my own brother had sabotaged one of the most important friendships of my life just so he could have her to himself. All the pain, confusion, and betrayal, it wasn't just her being distant or her family acting strange. It was him. He wanted her isolated, and in the process, he destroyed not only their relationship, but also the bond between me and my best friend. Story 31. When I was in university, I was part of a close-knit group of friends. Every Friday, we held community dinners with the idea of building intentional relationships and supporting each other. Many of them were activists, passionate about social justice, race equality, and LGBTQ rights. We even had an open-door policy. If someone needed help, we'd pool resources to support them. Around that time, I had a coworker who was going through a terrible situation. She'd been kicked out of her house after coming out as a lesbian. I told her about our group, and everyone immediately wanted to help. I even talked to my mom, who agreed to let her stay in my old room rent-free until she could get back on her feet. It felt like the right thing to do, especially since she had also been grieving her grandmother's declining health. But a few weeks later, things started to unravel. My mom called saying something wasn't right and that the girl had to leave. I was confused and tried to reason with her, but she was adamant. That set off chaos within the group. The girl accused my mom of being homophobic, saying she was being kicked out for no reason. Suddenly, I was being ostracized. Most of my friends sided with her, calling my mom cruel and judgmental. A few people who knew my family well felt something was off, but the damage was done. I was basically exiled from the group. When I went home, I saw why my mom had been so upset. My old room was destroyed. Trash everywhere, dishes piled up, rotting food stuffed into corners. She hadn't been cleaning. She'd just been throwing used dishes away. But that wasn't even the worst part. My mom told me the girl was drinking heavily, using substances, and verbally abusing her. I confronted her, and she broke down, begging not to be kicked out. We gave her until the end of the month to leave. My grandfather and one of my remaining friends helped her move out, and I stayed to clean up the mess. That's when I found several checks written out in her dying grandmother's name checks she had been cashing to buy expensive art supplies. We called her family and learned the full story. Her parents hadn't kicked her out for being gay. They had kicked her out for stealing from her dying grandmother, using her bank information, signing her name, even collecting her Social Security payments while she was still alive. It was fraud, plain and simple. We reported it and eventually found out she was also deep into addiction. When I tried to explain this to the group, most of them refused to believe me. They said I was exaggerating or trying to justify my mom's supposed bigotry. Only one person believed me, a friend who had dealt with a sibling struggling with addiction and recognized the same patterns. Losing that community hurt more than I can describe. We'd built something that was supposed to be about love and trust, but it crumbled because people chose to believe a liar over the truth. I learned the hard way that not every cause-driven community practices the empathy they preach. Story 32. I've told this story before, but it still chills me when I think about it. I can't say for sure if what I discovered was real, but everything I found lined up in a way that still makes my stomach turn. A few years ago, I was living with my boyfriend, now my ex, and our relationship was already falling apart. He was clearly struggling mentally, but refused to get help. As a result, he became emotionally abusive and unpredictable, often switching between guilt trips and complete neglect. One night, he suddenly decided to open up to me. Part of me thought it was another manipulation tactic, but part of me still isn't sure. He told me he had killed someone, a man who had assaulted his sister. The way he said it was calm, almost casual, like he expected me to understand. I remember feeling frozen. I wanted to believe it was just a twisted lie meant to scare me, but he'd already threatened to hit me before, and knowing he might have actually killed someone made my fear of him spiral. A few weeks later, while he was at work, I used his computer to copy a game over to mine using a LAN cable. We didn't have internet at the time. As I was searching through his files, I found a folder labeled Books. Inside were dozens of disturbing documents, detailed guides on how to hide a body, how to kill efficiently, how to build homemade explosives, even a full copy of the Anarchist Cookbook. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. When he got home, I confronted him, told him what I found, and said I didn't feel safe. He didn't deny any of it. He just looked at me and said, "I'm keeping them, and I don't care about you, myself, or anyone around me." That was the last straw. I told him to leave, and he moved out soon after. Not long after he left, my little gray cat disappeared. I searched for days but never found him. I want to believe it was just bad timing, a coincidence, but part of me can't stop wondering. 2 years later, a stray cat wandered into my yard out of nowhere. I gave him a piece of steak, and he decided to stay. Now, as I'm typing this, he's sleeping on my chest. I don't know what really happened back then, but I do know this. Sometimes the universe gives you small bits of peace to heal from the darkness you've been through. Story 33. When I was in middle school, one of my closest friends suddenly turned on me. Out of nowhere, she started bullying me, relentlessly spreading cruel rumors, getting others to join in, making every day feel like torture. I couldn't understand why. We'd been so close, and then she just decided to destroy me. It got so bad that I tried to take my own life. The emotional pain, the confusion, the isolation, it all became too much. I remember feeling completely worthless, wondering what I'd done to deserve it. Years later, I found out the truth. A mutual acquaintance told me that around the same time she started targeting me, her father had been arrested for rape and for having child pornography on his computer. That revelation hit me like a punch to the chest. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her world had fallen apart, and instead of dealing with that trauma, she'd redirected all her anger, fear, and shame at me. I had just been her easiest target. The lies she told about me stuck. They followed me through school, through every friendship, through years of humiliation and whispers behind my back. By the time I finished high school, I couldn't stand being in that town anymore.